Thank you. We would take public comment now. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from last month's board meeting, April 17th, 2019.
I move we approve the April 17th, 2019 board meeting minutes.
Second.
Any corrections or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now, how about the August 24th special call meeting?
I'll make a motion.
April 24th.
Oh, go ahead.
Checking, testing you.
I'll make a motion to approve the April 24th special call meeting minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that one? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll
That
follow up.
motion carries.
I'll follow up with a motion for the May 7th, 2019 special call meeting minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments or corrections on May 7th meeting? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Finance Report, Commissioner Arman.
This is the smallest finance report I've ever given. We're down to one page is all, so I will start. So starting with the Lake District balance sheet, the assets side of it, the Lake District experienced a $76,835 increase in cash assets for the March month end. Fixed assets, there was no change. Other assets, the Lake District 2016 Series Note Reserve Account had an increase of $102 for the month of April. The liabilities and fund balance, the bonds had no change, and all other liability parameters were either unchanged or normal for the month, including the 2% credit to the due to the arts line item due to the county increment check received in April. The Lake District P&L, the Lake District received $54,976 in tax increment revenue from the county in April. Property divestitures net line item value of $35,000 reflects the Midtown Ventures LLC deposit per Midtown A&E project agreement. All other P&L expenditure line items are in line with normal operating month. So that is the Lake District. Moving on to the River District, the balance sheet. On the asset side, the River District experienced $56,104 decrease in cash assets from the March month end. On the liabilities and fund balance, all liability parameters were either unchanged or normal for the month, including the 2% credit due to the arts line item due to the April county increment check. The River District P&L, the River District received $12,846 in tax increment revenue from the county in April. The agency-funded initiatives, Celtice roadway contractor payment of $27,706. The Stimson Mills site Atlas Project Phase 1, $28,647 to Welsh Comer payment for planning efforts. All other P&L expenditure line items are in line with normal operating month. So that is the finance report for the month of May.
Thank you, sir.
Moving on to payables. Payables. First of all, we have a payment of $740 to Elam and Burke for legal services. A payment of $4,170.60 to Holly Troxel, and broken out $2,640.60 was made legal counsel for the URD's planning process, and $1,530 was for the legal for the Lake Urban Renewal District Health Corridor Initiative, Midtown Ventures LLC initiative. We have a $5,000 payment to Jobs Plus for the 2019 payment. This is our annual payment. This was approved last year back when we set the budget. The Atlas Mill Initiative, $78,647.50 paid to Welsh Comer for planning, and $200 was paid for the Four Corner Master Project on just for some costs on the North Park Drive subdivision. Total expenditures for the month of May, $88,758.10. That is the payables for the month of May.
Thank you, Mick. I'll entertain a motion to approve the budget and payables.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the monthly financials and the district payables for the current month as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, motion carries. Next on the list is Commissioner Jordan, parking update.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, we had a meeting yesterday, and so give you a quick update. For all the lots, the revenue in April was $33,140, and that compares to $31,605 in 2018. So I don't know, we're up not quite a couple $1,000s. And the permits, monthly permits in McEwen, they're down a little bit. We had 368 in 2018 and 345 in 19. But some of those probably migrated up to the new garage on Coeur d'Alene. Don't know exactly, but we're thinking that's kind of most likely where they went. So the revenue is down a little bit, 7,125 permit revenue in 18 and 6655 in 19. And let's see. In the Coeur d'Alene garage, our new Coeur d'Alene Avenue garage, we've got 200 monthly permits right now. And that's in the, the main part of the garage. And then we've got 15 in that secure area down on the lower level by 3rd Street where it's gated. So the Parking Commission came up with a new proposal. So they're going to be announcing that we're lowering the monthly parking in the secured area to $50. And then they're going to do some advertising and marketing and social media and so forth to get the word out. Pretty much unanimously, I think, we're close to unanimously, the Parking Commission felt that there's a market for this. And for $50 a month, there's probably, with summer coming up, there's boaters, there's business people, there's owners, there's people in condos that need another parking spot. So we think there's a market for it. And it doesn't really work. There was some discussion, but it doesn't really work to try and put that parking in with mix that in with the main part of the garage because it's separate and it's gated. But anyway, we're pretty hopeful about that. We think there's a market for that. And let's see, also the first week in May in 2019, they did, the revenue in all the lots was $14,962. In 18, it was $8,605, $8,605, so we're up $63.57. And also, the Coeur d'Alene Avenue garage, that's averaging about $1,000 a month right now, and this has been the slow season, but it's averaging about $1,000 a month in just daily parking, not the permit parking. So that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
So the parking permits are monthly, but is that a contract? Do you have to go to your contract? How does that work?
I think they do, isn't it 6 months at a
6
time,
months.
Jim?
Correct.
Yeah.
And the monthly passes are just month to month.
Righty.
Yeah, they're $17. It's $15 and a $2 handling charge, I think, if you're talking about the non-secured ones up there in the general
Correct.
area. And then they require 6 month on the secured ones too.
And those are up, I think, in June, aren't they? The 6-month contracts that were signed?
Yeah, they're all expiring, and
Yeah.
so then we're going to be trying this new program.
Thank you, sir. Tony Burns, Executive Director's Report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to invite Phil Boyd up to visit with the board and kind of update the board on the Atlas project area, including the development standards and a proposed contract amendment for developer outreach in Atlas Waterfront and La Crosse Park priority improvements development. So, Mr. Boyd, thank you.
Thank you, Tony, Chairman Hoskins, and members of the board. So as Tony said, I'll give you a little bit of an update, and then we'll talk about the potential additional improvements to the Atlas project and the La Crosse area. So one of the things I first want to start with is a process overview. Sometimes, I know you guys don't touch this every single day. And so this is just a little bit of a refresher of where we're at in it. I want to update you on the development standards and the progress we've been making there, and then talk about the additional public space improvements. You have the memo that addresses a lot of this that I had written to Tony earlier this week. So the process overview, just these kind of 6 points that we're currently at. I'm not regurgitating the meeting minute or the meeting list that I used to send you or used to bring forward because we're moving on now. The original public space project, the clean and green one, we're under design on that full tilt. The intent is to put that out to bid in July. It got pushed a little bit because the Planning Commission, the Parks and Rec Commission desired additional public meetings. We also had some dialogue with the Planning Commission. So it's been pushing that. It's probably okay because the construction will spill over into 2020. And we intend to do a milestone, what's called a milestone contract, which you'd like I can explain to it, but we intend, that'll get us some better bid pricing, we anticipate. The clean and green improvements are funded. The additional improvements we'll talk about here a little bit later. The development standards, the master plat, and the PUD, we're moving forward with all of those things. You saw the recent email about the road names. That's one of the minor details we need to get completed. The pre-RFPs, pre-marketing, developer engagement, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but that's really the next step if we intend to, if the board intends to sell property in the near future. We need to get moving on this step number 3. Number 4, which is a future phase, infrastructure design, and 5 and 6 are also future phases as we move into actual block sales and then infrastructure construction in 2020. So that's kind of where we're at in a broad overview. This is just a little bit of a refresher. This is the imagery you guys have seen before, but we continually update it graphically like this just to kind of keep track of the changes. One of the things you'll see is this marina that was down here is gone because it wasn't a high priority for the Parks and Rec or City Council. We moved this one in this location. It used to be right here in front of this commercial one, but for a variety of reasons, it works better here, which I can get into the details if you'd like. You'll notice the parking lot that was 65 spaces is now 130 spaces. And that was in response to comments we heard out of both the Parks and Rec Commission, the Planning Commission, and the City Council. Kind of the Midtown phenomena, I think. This is what we would consider to be very well parked, considerable number of spaces in there. You'll also notice a little bit of changes in this vicinity, this additional block of homes up here. I think I've mentioned this before that we were able to capture from some of our soils investigation work. This here is rendered as a mixed-use product where there's retail on the bottom floor and multifamily, either condominium above with parking below it. It's just one concept, but we decided to render it here just to show the variety. And I'll show you some more of that when we get into the development standards. And then just a few other changes down here where we've got the trail configuration has been modified a little bit. So those are just some big changes. Here, you can kind of see this is blank. There's a couple of different scenarios that we have up in this parcel. This is the parcel we referred to as Phase 4, which has quite a bit of remediation cost associated with it, which is why it's in Phase 4. This is another little piece of development dirt that we captured, again, from the Mount Hink soils investigation. So the development standards, again, this is a little bit of a refresher. This project, the property will be sold in a different way than private development, obviously. And so when a buyer comes in, they need to have a clear understanding of what they're getting into. In addition to that, we need to have a clear understanding with the Planning Commission for the PUD variances we're going to get. And that was really the genesis of the development standards, is to provide clarity both to the city and what they're going to approve and provide clarity for a potential buyer. So that's the purpose of the development standards. These are just some excerpts from back in April when we did a workshop with the Planning Commission. I'm going to click through these really quickly, and if the board has questions, I can move back. It starts out with a vision. We talk about the illustrative plan, the phasing, then we get into the actual development. And here's where you can really capture where a potential builder or developer would really get to understand what can I do here. And am I interested in this, or do I want to pass? It shows the overall development concepts. We talk about frontage types, where you have flexibility, where you don't have flexibility. So for instance, on this Atlas Road extension here, there's very little flexibility on that frontage because that's really the premier roadway in this development, and we don't want any driveways penetrating that. Areas back in here, there's more flexibility with it that are outlined down here below. So again, you can kind of see where we're providing information to a developer or a builder who might be interested. Give character slides of the frontage type, again, visual aids help. Then we move into block standards. These are the different blocks in here. And so, and we've talked about this before, depending on the type of builder, developer you are, you look at block 2 and you may say, gosh, I want to build multifamily there. It would be really cool. Well, when you look at that particular block, multifamily is not allowed there. You could go up to block 10, but you can't do it on block 2 because it would so significantly change the character of the development that it's not an appropriate use there. So what we've done, and when I say we, GGLO, because this is what they do, they've gone in and detailed block standards, everything down to the allowable building types, how big the lots are, how tall they can be, alley conditions, all those different elements that make up a block's design. And then we show them potential configurations. And so here's block 2 in that illustration I provided. Here is block 2 blown up. And you can see here's townhomes, here's single family, here's a combination. So if you're the buyer, now you say, gosh, I got a good understanding, and you can start figuring out how much you're prepared to pay for that through the RFP process. And obviously, this would be a significant part of the RFP. This is this is block 3. I'll click back. So block 3 is right here. It's quite odd because there's quite a bit of topography here. This triangle doesn't lend itself to a nice configuration. But there's a couple of different scenarios in there that you can see. There's multifamily here, stack flats, townhomes. There's just different configurations that GGLO has considered that would be the appropriate type of use there. So those are kind of just a snapshot. I didn't want to go through every single block, but just to give the board a flavor of what those development standards would look like. If there's any questions, or I'll just keep moving.
Bill, when will that be available to the public?
It's available now.
It is?
Yeah, it's, Hillary's been really great about, Hillary Anderson, planning director, has been great about putting this stuff up on the website.
Okay. So it's on our website now?
It's on the city's website. Yep.
Can we get it on our website?
I don't know if people. We can. I don't know if people will look for it there because it's really kind of city-driven right now, but we can put it out there.
Well, one of the things that came out of this process, the Planning Commission has really been engaged because you can imagine they don't typically get to provide developers input on how the development should be done. They get to evaluate and then render their decision based on the land use. So they've been, have given a really great feedback to our team to help shape the standards. We're actually going to do one more workshop with them, and hopefully that'll be the end of the workshops because it's kind of dragging on our schedule a little bit. So moving on to the additional project improvements, I'm not going to hit every single one of these again unless the board wants me to go back because you guys have seen this enough. The big red circles show the improvements, the park element improvements that between the Planning Commission and the City Council said to Ignite, here's what we would like Ignite to consider providing additional funding for. And this is, you can see both these are excerpts out of your memo. The one with the yellow X through it is the water feature that got axed. So that's not part of the improvements. But generally, they are providing additional access to the water that didn't exist in the clean and green option, a vendor building in this area, a park maintenance building in this area, the beach, the dog park, a crossing up here at Suzanne, a more developed crossing, a safer crossing up at Suzanne. This is the summary of those total project costs. These are the design fees associated with this set of project elements up here. And this is, again, what's in your memo. And the numbering obviously matches. You'll notice that some of these don't have a design fee associated with them because they were in our prior scope. There was just never any construction funded for it. So we were, at the time, betting, and they were pretty small elements when you look at them. We were betting that they would either get funded or hopefully they would be able to be funded through the contingency. Because you can imagine when we budgeted this thing early on, there's a pretty healthy contingency in it. They would have been bid as alternates originally. If the board decides today or at some point in the future to allocate this funding to the project, they will be bid as part of the base project. So any questions on this before I move on to the La Crosse ones? Okay. So La Crosse, again, you guys have seen this slide before. Whoops. And the elements, the list over here, again, is straight out of the memo. This is what was presented to City Council and the Parks and Rec Commission. They fed back to Ignite what their priorities were. Understand from Tony that the Finance Committee has said this is the one that they are considering, or perhaps we'll make a recommendation to the full board what would get funded. And it's the remediation, the site remediation, a picnic shelter here, and then a gravel path through there. And the big concept, just as a refresher, is that site's really not maintainable by Bill Greenwood and his team. I think all of you have been out there. The objective here was to do something to it, a minimal amount of things to it, to set it up for these future improvements. So like these micro soccer fields here, a parking lot, pickleball courts here. Set it up for those things, but don't invest a substantial amount of, or request a substantial bit of funding from Ignite, but at least make it maintainable. So Bill can get out there, deal with the weeds, mow it a couple of times a year, put a trail through it, so at least the public can enjoy it a little more than what they currently do. The picnic shelter element up here was one that Bill also thought could be constructed now. It's kind of a remote picnic shelter because under this scenario, La Crosse Road is not constructed and these parking lots are not constructed. So, but it could be usable by just people walking along and stopping there, and taking the sights in. Any questions about that one? Okay. So then moving on to the next element, which is the disposition, the process for selling phase one. So here is phase one. It's this kind of the salmon color. The parcels for phase one are obviously right in this area here. So in order to initiate that process, one of the things that we've talked about from the very, very beginning, and primarily you guys have heard this advice from Heartland, is when a public entity is going to dispose of property, it's unlike a private entity doing it. And you kind of have one shot to get it done correctly, because if you demonstrate to builders, developers, that you really don't have a robust process, they're on their way. They'll move on to something else. So this initial phase one step is intended to put together a pre-RFP offering. So you can, it's these, just a succinct summary that talks about what's the vision, what's Ignite trying to do here, how long will it take. It's supported with the design guidelines, which I showed you earlier. And that's used to send out to developers initially and builders, and then start getting some feedback from them. Does this make sense to you? Do you have any input on it? How do you think that the market will receive this? What do you anticipate absorption to be? So we're starting to get that feedback before we put out a full RFP. And obviously trying to make sure that Ignite has as robust of RFP offering as possible. So those are really the meat and potatoes of this scope of work, which is primarily Heartland's scope of work. We have a little bit in it just to answer boring utility questions that we anticipate the developers will ask us during this process. And then just working with Heartland on reaching out to both local folks here, which there is a growing list. As you can imagine, we get phone calls and inquiries. I think the mayor has. I know Hillary has certainly got quite a few of them. This process is intended to capture those folks' input. Kiki Miller, who's the city liaison to NIBCA, has also gotten quite a few inquiries about the project. So this is where we would be able to do that. There's also some time in here for Heartland to give support to GGLO when we start doing things like changing the land uses in there, because we're hearing it from Planning Commission or GGLO is thinking of an idea. Heartland's really the one that gives us an assessment of how does that impact the finances. When the schedule starts to drag out, what happens to the finances there as well? So that's one of the tasks in here, and then just updating the pro forma. So that's what that scope of services is. Again, this was in your memo. So in summary, I guess I could have made that text bigger. This is just the three tables you saw earlier. This is the Atlas Park summary. So the estimated additional costs that the city had said to Ignite, would you consider funding this? This list over here is also a summary of La Crosse, where the city said, would you consider funding this? And then the ones in yellow are the ones that the Finance Committee I believe is bringing forward to the board. And then down here is the professional service fees that goes with each one of these elements, which again you saw in your memo. And so that's the quick story through that. I'm glad to answer any questions.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Phil, so the budget, I noticed that you have a budget versus fees on some of them. So does that mean that your budget will not exceed that amount? Or, so not necessarily, you don't have to necessarily expense those budgeted amounts, but it's not to exceed, right?
Correct. And so in the memo, I think there's a little footnote in there that describes that under this particular one, under Heartland's work, and this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but it's something that Tony and I have been talking about. They're going to bring all this expertise to bear early on. And, you know, some element of that is going to rub off, we'll say, on Tony. And does it rub off to the point, and are there staff opportunities to take over some of those duties that Heartland might be doing, engaging with developers? And having that dialogue with them. That's why that work is a fee budget. And what I asked Heartland to do was give me a budget to take it through to completion, like you're doing everything. But realize if we start doing things and then pretty soon Tony says, well, developer X is coming in, I've sat through 2 or 3 of these, I'll go do that work. You know, and just, you know, I'm kind of being a little bit presumptuous about Tony's time because I know it's limited. But he and I had talked about that, and whether it's him or if there's other opportunities, we just didn't want Heartland tied into that. That's why those are fee budgets. The ones back here, the professional service fees, those are intended to be fixed fees, so it won't go beyond that. We've gone through and done man-hour estimates on them and looked at the scope of work, and it's clear enough that we can estimate those very tightly.
Thank you.
I have a question on the La Crosse Park improvements, Phil. So when I look at this, the Spokane River Picnic Shelter is about $150,000 to build. But then there's also the La Crosse Park Restroom and Picnic Shelter, which is $300,000. So we're going to have 2 picnic shelters not far from each other, and one will have restrooms.
Right.
I think restrooms are essential down there. I mean, we walked back and forth there a lot, and I mean, there's no restrooms from the time you leave,
Yeah.
Riverstone until you get NIC. So, I mean, personally, I would rather see the Spokane River Picnic Shelter with restrooms, if possible. I don't know if that spot would be big enough, but is that something we could possibly look at, and price out, or would it be the same price as the La Crosse restroom with restrooms, or?
We could. The part of the detail that you don't quite see in this, Commissioner Arman, is in order to make the restrooms work over here next to the parking lot, we have to have water and sewer to them, and I would anticipate Bill Greenwood would say he wants vehicle access to them. in order to properly maintain them, because they have to be closed down at night.
So we'd have to have the street in and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so when we talked through it, and I think Tony and I had some dialogue about this as well as with Bill, you know, you could put restrooms here, but we would have to extend water to it. There is sewer relatively close by. But then just the operational challenges for Bill, because now he's driving on the Centennial Trail to get to that and maintain that. And
Okay, so if we don't do the street improvement and all that type of stuff, restrooms down in that area just do not work. Okay.
yeah, it's not the right sequencing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Additional questions, comments? Good presentation, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Good overview, too.
So just to follow up on Phil's presentation, you know, the timing is either now or later for the board to make a decision on whether to proceed with these initiatives. Phil's presentation has kind of bundled these up so that if the board wants to, he can get these out to bid in July for a contract that would go over this fall and next spring, and try to come up with some synergies on cost savings with this. I mean, and I feel if you want to touch on that about how you do the milestone project here.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I glossed over that, and it is outlined in the memo. The concept here is to take, and certainly with the Atlas improvements, many of them, certainly the water access ones, if those are not put into the July bid documents, they're probably not going to get in, because we'll end up doing the upland work, and you can't really go back without tearing up everything that you've just built. Things like the vendor building, the park maintenance building down here, you could build a pad for them, and then come back later on and build them. But some of the other improvements really need to be part of this phase of work in order to make them cost effective. So those could be part of the July bid. The same thing with the La Crosse project is if you put those in, you achieve that economy of scale. The contractor's mobilizing once, they have multiple things to work on. And as I mentioned earlier, we're intending to do a milestone bid. A lot of times we're accustomed to, contractor, you have 90 days to build this. And, you know, from when the time you let the bid to the time that you commission the building, they're going. In this scenario, what we intend to do is use milestone dates. So we will tell them by February of 2020, you have to have all the shoreline work completed. By June of 2020, you have to have all the upland work completed. What happens with that is the gigantic contractors that have 6-10 crews will say, well, shoot, if I put 6 crews on it, I can start in November and finish by February. Other contractors that might have 2 crews will say, I'm gonna have to start early, but I have this continuous stream of work, so I can keep my crews continuously busy. What we've effectively done is opened our arms to capture the entire construction market, developer or builder from the small guy to the big, huge guy. And so obviously what that does is generate interest and generate competition. So using a milestone contract, accomplishes what we need them to accomplish, but it opens the door to more bidders on it. And even when you add things like La Crosse, you can imagine, I'll work on Atlas, and then when I get to a stopping point there, I'll move my crew down to La Crosse and work on that. When I get to a stopping point, I'll move back to Atlas. You just have more things to work on. And that's why when Tony and I had talked about it, it was logical to us that we try to bundle it all up into the July bid package. But obviously, that's July, will be here tomorrow. And so we'll be pushing hard to get those in there, but it is feasible at this point.
So the projects are tied together then?
They could be, again, it's up to the board. The board could say, no, I don't want to fund La
Will the
Crosse.
funding be the same if they're 2 separate projects? I mean, if they're not funded at the same time? Because you're saying the contractor is going to be mobilized and it'll cost less if we do them
Development
together?
of scale.
Yeah, these are budget-driven projects, right? So essentially, we've estimated them. If the board allocates funding to them, we'll design it to fit within that budget. What happens is when you bundle them together, you have more range of motion on things. We'll end up with ad alternates on this, like we do with a lot of our projects. we want to have add alternates, so when we get to the point of award, the board can award a project. Sometimes you have to make some trade-offs, right? And we've done that in the past. Memorial, we did that. We didn't award the restroom, and then we went back and retooled it and eventually awarded it, and that project came in $52,000 under budget, the whole Memorial project. We'll do the same one here. When they're bundled together, it just gives us more flexibility across the whole, the entire process.
So really, this is all going to be 1920 budget year, because we're not going to spend the funds that are allocated for the current budget year this year. We're going to roll those to next year, and then we're going to allocate these funds for 2019, 2020. So it'd be basically pre-approving the 2019, 2020 allocation. Is that correct, Tony?
If the board were to proceed with the presentation tonight, there would be approximately $288,000 that would be spent in this fiscal year that ends in September.
Right.
We do have the money in the fiscal year budget for the Lake and River District to pay for these right now. Actually, we have a lot in these districts,
We have a lot.
budgets that will be rolled over, but we do have funds available for this planning that would happen in this fiscal year. Then we would amend the budgets, and then we would plan for next year where we would really roll in the major amount of money to get these built.
So really, all we're doing is we're asking Phil to go back and continue the planning process through the summer.
Right. If you want to move forward, and I'll ask Phil this so everybody understands, currently for the July bid environment, we have the clean and green scheduled to go. So if the board wants to put these other amenities on top of it that you've been discussing with City Council and Park and Rec Commission, this is the time to consider that so that we can benefit from economies of scale and get the planning done and maybe a better bid environment, so.
That's correct. And when we talk about the term planning, what we would characterize it as is we're doing the design and putting the construction documents together, the bid documents, the plans and specifications, so contractors can price the project. When it comes back, as I mentioned earlier, to a certain extent, it will be minutized for the board, if you will. There'll be a base bid, and then there'll be some alternates in it. When we get to July and we open up bids, the board will be able to look at it and say, well, we're going to award the base and alternate 1, 2, and 4. We're going to skip 3. For whatever reason, it could be the picnic shelter illustration. You might say, gosh, let's hold off on that, not award it, and we'll wait because something new has happened on La Crosse Road. The city's going to do it, or a developer came in. So it gives some flexibility for the board later in the summer.
Well, I'd make a motion to approve the funding for additional professional services to continue the design of both the Atlas improvements and also the La Crosse improvements.
I'll second that.
You mentioned the design cost.
Well, it's the Atlas Cross Park priority improvements would be the
So
motion.
that's the design cost and the construction cost. There's
Well, we're just looking at approving design costs right now, correct?
The amendment to the professional services contract for
Correct.
Comer.
Yes, yes.
just professional services for now.
Yes.
Right. This would be amendment number 6 to the professional services contract that you're just telling Welch-Gomer to go ahead and plan for these elements that you hopefully will approve to be funded through a construction contract down the road.
Correct. That's exactly what I was saying. Yes.
And just for clarity on the motion, Mr. Commissioner Arman, are you suggesting the entire $307,050?
Yes, because that's the additional fees for the Atlas project and also the La Crosse project. So yes, the $307,050.
And that was my second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So that's just the fees.
Correct.
What happens if we approve this and then for got a wild hair and decided not to approve the changes, the additional beyond the clean and green?
You still got fees.
Then
We
I
still
think
have to pay the
you
fees.
have good planning in place for future decisions by other entities or whatever. But if this all goes back to the discussions with City Council and the Park and Rec Commission through the workshop, is that this is what folks think are priorities for this area, and if the board would agree to fund these, then that's kind of what you need to kind of get on the front end of the planning and design and trying to make sure it all fits together.
Well, Tony, I guess that's the point. I mean, we're agreeing to the additional funding for the design of the project. At this point in time, we don't know how it's going to come in. I mean, if this comes in way over budget, we're not going to approve everything because it's over budget. So at this point in time, we're just saying, go out and design it, let's put it out for bid, and then let's review it.
Correct. I will add the clarification that parts of this design that we're going to put in will become part of the base bid, and they're not easily extracted. And so the board, to some extent, is committing yourself to some of that $2.72 million there.
So
And when
do
I
you-
say committing yourself,
Do you need a different motion then to actually approve the funding of this too, or just, I thought it was just the professional service
it is
agreement?
just the professional services, but I guess what I want to just make sure that the board understands is some of this design that it goes together, it becomes part of the base project, because you can't easily add alternate some of them out.
Okay.
And so you're kind of saying, instead of building a $200,000 house, we're going to go tell the architect, we want to build a $250,000 house. And later on, when the bid comes in and it's $250,000, you say, well, I decided I don't want that. It's not easy to just go in and start ripping out bathtubs.
Sure.
And there'll be elements here. We're going to try to build in as much flexibility for the board so you can award things that meet your overall objectives. But some of them, it's certainly going to be consuming some of that budget.
Any further discussion? Tony, could you read that motion back to us, please, so we all have a good understanding?
Motion by Commissioner Arman, second by Commissioner Chapkus, approving the Welchcomber Engineers Contract Amendment Number 6 as proposed and presented in an amount not to exceed $307,050.
And that's design fees for those three elements. The additional Atlas Space Clean and Green Plus, the Atlas Development Property Distribution Process Phase 1, and also then the La Crosse Park Design Fee.
Correct.
Okay? Any further comments? All in, go ahead, Brad.
It's a lot of fees, but that's how it goes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just a few other initiative updates under my Executive Director's report. On the Health Corridor Master Planning Initiative, members of the HDR consultant team plan to do a tour next week on the Health Corridor area to kind of familiarize themselves with the study area. So we're working on scheduling that. An update on Memorial Grandstand project. I'm not sure if you all had a chance to read the paper this morning, but the article pretty much summed up kind of the state of affairs there. The Walker Construction bid came in about $500,000 plus or minus over the available funding, and the Public Works Committee on May 13th agreed to send it to City Council for further discussion and review to kind of see what the council would like to do on that project. So that's kind of where it stands. I assume it'll be on the May 21st City Council meeting agenda. And finally, the North Idaho Collaborative Education Facility, the nice building. I've been told that landscaping will be done in the next 30 days with a soft opening plan for July 8th. And they're planning for a ribbon cutting event later this summer. And I think Commissioner Garcia had a chance to walk through the facility here recently, and she thought it was looking pretty good. So
I did.
All righty.
that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Tony. Next on the agenda is Board Commissioner comments. Do we have any Board Commissioner comments?
You know I have a couple of comments because I told you I do. First of all, I wanted to thank Phil Boyd and Dell Hatch from Welchcomber for taking the time out last week to not only provide a walkthrough tour for some of the board members of the Atlas Mill site, but actually going to the effort of making maps and putting numbers on the maps and helping us figure out where we were in conjunction to all the visuals that we've been seeing. It was an extremely useful and valuable use of my time, in my personal opinion. I would strongly encourage any other board members who weren't able to take advantage of that to take advantage of future tours that do get, or opportunities to tour that get arranged, because I really think it was well worth my time. And wear tennis shoes, it's like a 3-mile walk. The other comment was about the nice facility. I did have an opportunity to go through the facility on Friday morning, and it's looking good. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful building, lots of windows and open spaces, and it's going to be a nice addition to the campus and for higher ed in this community. It's going to be a great deal to have that open and available.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Look forward to checking it out. Any other board commissioner comments?
I just wanted to say, Phil, thank you for the professional services update. I think that it's going to be really critical to get all of those aligned in order for that to be a successful project. So I think it's well worth the professional fees on the front end to have a successful project on the back end. So thank you for all of that.
Great. Anything else? Brad?
Yeah, just real briefly, I'd echo Commissioner Garcia. I took that tour, and thank you very much, Phil, and you know, I've looked at that property off and on several times over the years, but to actually just walk every bit of it, the whole length, and walk down to the shore and look at everything, I mean, and have a guide and have these stakes out there, and you can say that stake is this number right here. I mean, that really helped a lot, and you really get to feel the scale of everything, and you can see the challenges when some of the shoreline remediation that has to be done. You can also see exactly how the Lance Douglas multifamily property fits right in with this too, in case that comes up again at the city council, and see just exactly how all that ties in together. So anyway, if they do another one, I'm sure they will be pretty soon. There'll be another opportunity. I'd strongly encourage you to take the tour. I might even take it a second time. Sometimes it takes longer for things to sink into me, so I might take a second tour.
Good.
But thank you very much. That was great.
Anything else? Next on the agenda is our second opportunity for public comment. Any public comment? Seeing none, then I'll entertain a motion to enter executive session.
I guess this is my job nowadays to do this, so I'll just go ahead
You're
and
pretty
read
good
this.
at it now.
I'd like to make a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061F to communicate with legal counsel for the public agency to discuss the legal ramifications and legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated but imminently likely to be litigated.
I second.
Oh, go
Motion
ahead.
and second. Roll call, please.
Jepkes,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Arman,
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Metz,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Widmar.
We're in executive session, and that's a wrap.